Welcome to The Explainer. We are jumping right in today because we're diving into an ancient, highly emotional cinematic script about unimaginable suffering and ultimately discovering a faith that simply cannot be destroyed. We're looking at the story of Job. And this really isn't just some dusty historical or religious text. It's a profound, raw look into the human condition and how we actually process tragedy when our world falls apart. And that brings us right to the absolute core of our time together today. What happens to faith when you lose absolutely everything? It's a heavy, heavy question, isn't it? But it sets up the thematic anchor for our entire journey through Job's life. I mean, we all like to think our foundations are rock solid when the weather is calm, but this narrative forces us to ask, what remains when the storm takes the entire house? Okay, let's dive into this baseline. To truly grasp the sheer drop of Job's fall, we have to first understand the incredible heights he started from. Job wasn't just a guy getting by. He was a man who essentially had it all. Wealth, family, deep respect from his community. He was the absolute picture of ancient success in the land of Uz. We are talking about massive, mind-boggling wealth and influence for his time. Thousands of sheep, camels, oxen, and donkeys. A sprawling estate, a huge family, a massive workforce of servants. But the source material is super careful to point out that Job's greatest treasure wasn't actually his bank account. It was his deep, daily devotion to God. He was blameless, upright. He didn't just pray for himself either. He prayed and offered sacrifices daily for his children. He was, by all accounts, a genuinely, exceptionally good man. But then, everything changes. The whole narrative suddenly shifts from the dusty, peaceful fields of Uz to this crazy cosmic courtroom in the heavens. Satan appears before God. God points out Job's unparalleled righteousness, but Satan immediately pushes back, totally questioning the true underlying motives of Job's devotion. Satan challenges God with this exact thesis. Does Job fear God for nothing? He's essentially arguing that Job's faith is completely transactional. Satan's like, look, he only worships you because you put a hedge of protection around him and made him rich. If you take away the blessings, Satan claims, Job will surely curse God to his face. So this prompts God to allow a test of Job's faith, but there's one strict condition. Satan can touch everything Job has, but he absolutely cannot take Job's life. Now, brace yourselves, because we're hitting the descent. I want you to feel the sheer velocity and weight of what happens next. This wasn't some slow decline over a few tough years. This was a catastrophic, rapid-fire tragedy that unfolded over the course of one single, ordinary day. And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying speed of his ruin. The messengers arrive back to back, literally interrupting each other. 9 a.m. The oxen and donkeys are stolen, servants killed. While that guy is still catching his breath, another messenger runs up at 10 a.m. Fire from heaven has destroyed the sheep. 11 a.m., camels taken by raiders. And then, at noon, the ultimate, unimaginable blow. A fourth messenger arrives. A powerful wind struck the house where Job's sons and daughters were eating together. The house collapsed, and they are all dead. In just a few hours, his wealth, his workforce, and his beloved children are completely, entirely gone. The silence that followed that last messenger must have been absolutely deafening. Job just falls to the ground. But his response? It's completely unexpected. In the absolute, agonizing depths of sudden grief, he speaks these incredibly raw words. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Instead of the curses Satan predicted, Job offers this agonizing yet profound act of worship. But the trial wasn't over. Satan returns to the courtroom, arguing that a man will give up anything to save his own skin. So the test moves from Job's possessions directly to his own physical body. Job is struck with these agonizing, painful sores from the very top of his head to the soles of his feet. The guy who once sat among kings in fine robes is now covered in suffering, just sitting all alone in a pile of ashes. And it's right here in this moment of total despair that we see the relational toll. Job's wife, watching her husband in sheer agony, having just lost all her children too, reaches her breaking point. She looks at him and says, "Curse God and die." And honestly, it is a perfectly human urge to just want the suffering to end. But Job? In a steadfast refusal to cave, he asks her, "Shall we accept good from God and not trouble?" Even in unspeakable physical agony, he flat out refuses to abandon his God. At this low point, 3 of Job's friends travel to see him. And when they arrive, it's so bad they don't even recognize him from a distance. The source material notes that they just sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights in complete silence, simply because they saw how great his suffering was. And frankly, that silence was probably the best thing they could have done. But eventually, they start talking. And when they do, they make some deeply, deeply damaging assumptions. Now, what's really interesting here is how it perfectly captures the very human reaction to another person's suffering. The friends operate on this super rigid transactional theology. They basically tell him, look, God is just, so if you're suffering this badly, you must be hiding some massive secret sin. God is punishing you. But Job's perspective is entirely different. He knows his own heart. He knows he is innocent of the kind of secret evil they're accusing him of. He absolutely does not understand why he is suffering, but he knows for a fact that their neat, tidy explanation is completely wrong. And this highlights such a critical aspect of Job's faith. He doesn't just sit there like a passive robot taking it. He cries out. He questions God. He essentially demands an audience in the heavenly courtroom because he wants answers, and he refuses to hide his pain. But notice this. He brings his honest, raw questions directly to God. He continues to seek him even when life makes absolutely zero sense. His faith wasn't about having all the answers nicely figured out. It was about trusting and seeking God anyway. Finally, we hit the climax of the story. After chapters and chapters of this agonizing back and forth debating between Job and his friends, the narrative reaches a boiling point. The skies get dark, a massive storm brews, and after a very long season of devastating silence, God finally speaks to Job, right out of the storm. But God's answer isn't what we or Job might expect. God doesn't hand Job an itemized printout explaining the heavenly wager with Satan. He doesn't explain a single detail of the why. Instead, God provides perspective by revealing exactly who he is. He takes Job on this breathtaking tour of the cosmos, pointing to the foundations of the earth, the constellations, wild animals, the deep sea. He reveals a greatness and wisdom so immense, showing Job that the universe operates on a scale far, far beyond human understanding. And Job truly hears this. His response is just total awe and surrender. He finally comprehends that God's purpose cannot be stopped. He says, "I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know." He realizes that even though he doesn't have the answers to his suffering, he has encountered the creator of the universe. And for him, that is enough. Which brings us to our final chapter, restoration and meaning. God actually rebukes the 3 friends for their terrible advice and rigid theology, and Job prays for them. And because Job remained faithful, holding on to God even in the absolute pitch black, God restores his life. The physical restorations were incredible. God blessed Job with even greater prosperity than he had before. He was given a new family, more children, and lived many more years. But the crucial point is this. The text makes it crystal clear that the greatest blessing wasn't the return of the camels and the sheep. It was the unshakable faith he found. Job lost everything, but in the process he found a faith that could not be destroyed by his circumstances. This ancient narrative leaves us with a powerful message for today. The story of Job teaches us that suffering does not mean God has abandoned us. We are all going to face moments where we just don't understand what is happening, where our prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling. But this story insists that God sees a much larger picture that we simply cannot see. Even when things look incredibly bleak, God is still working. To tie this all together, the source script points to this beautiful, universal message of comfort from the Psalms. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Job was as brokenhearted and crushed in spirit as a human being can possibly be, yet God was never far from him, even in the silence. As we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. It's the ultimate challenge of Job's life passed down to us right now. When the storms of life hit and you are stripped of the very things you find your security in, will you, like Job, discover a faith that cannot be destroyed? Thank you so much for exploring this profound story with me. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.